The sun was just starting to rise over the cornfields, and I was already out on my tractor. Harvest season doesn't wait for anyone, and every minute matters when the corn is ready. The hum of the engine, the smell of fresh-cut stalks, the rows lining up neatly. It was the kind of hard work that feels good because you know the payoff is coming. But not everyone sees it that way. While most of my neighbors understand the noise, the dust, and the long hours, there's always one person who can't stand it. That person was Karen. She had made it her mission to complain about everything I did. If the tractor ran past sunset, she called it a disturbance. If I parked a trailer near the road, she claimed it was an eyesore. And if she had the chance, she would remind everyone that the Homeowners Association was watching. That morning, as I eased the tractor closer to the property edge, I noticed her car creeping down the road. She slowed, stared, and then revved her engine as if daring me to move. My focus was on the harvest, but her glare told me something bad was coming. Karen had a history of stirring trouble, but I didn't expect her to cross the line in the way she did that day. Out in the middle of a corn harvest, with my tractor working and the fields alive, she decided to push her luck in a way that would cost her more than she ever imagined. The tractor had been running steady all morning, the big wheels pressing into the soft dirt as I cut through row after row. My fields stretched wide, and this time of year they were full of life. Golden stalks swaying in the breeze, waiting to be gathered before the weather turned. For me, this was more than just a job. It was my family's livelihood. Every harvest meant food on the table, bills paid, and a sense of pride in seeing hard work pay off. Most people in the area respected that. They knew when the tractors rolled out, it was part of the season. But Karen never saw it that way. She lived just beyond the edge of the field, in a house that the HOA seemed to guard like it was some kind of palace. To her, the sound of my tractor wasn't the heartbeat of farming. It was an annoyance. She made it clear she thought my equipment should stay off the road, even when it was legally allowed. That morning, her complaints weren't just words shouted from her driveway. She pulled her car closer and closer, as if to prove a point. The wide machine needed space, and I stayed carefully on my side, but she acted like I was invading her world. My focus was on steering through the harvest, but in the corner of my eye, I caught her inching forward, edging her shiny car far too close to the heavy steel frame of my tractor. Something was about to happen. Karen's car didn't just stop near the edge of the road. She crept forward like she owned the place. The rumble of my tractor drowned out most sounds, but I could still hear her horn blaring in short, angry bursts. She rolled her window down, shouting words I couldn't make out, waving her hands like she was directing traffic. I kept my eyes on the rows, careful not to jerk the wheel, but her reckless behavior pulled my attention. Instead of waiting for a safe spot to pass, she pressed the gas and tried to squeeze by. The space between her car and the side of my tractor was far too tight, and before I could even react, it happened. A loud screech tore through the air as metal scraped against metal. Her car's front bumper clipped the heavy frame of my tractor, leaving behind a streak of paint and a dent she couldn't deny. The impact jolted me, but the tractor barely moved. It was built for work, not fragile like her vehicle. She slammed on her brakes, jumped out, and stormed toward me, pointing at the scratch like it was my fault. Her voice rose above the hum of the engine, accusing me of blocking the road, of damaging her car, of being careless. But the truth was clear to anyone watching. She had pushed too far, too close, in a place she didn't belong. Her temper was about to dig her into a hole she couldn't climb out of. She stood in front of my tractor, hands on her hips, shouting like she was the victim of some crime. "You scratched my car," she yelled, as if the tractor had leapt at her on its own. I shut off the engine and climbed down, dust rising around my boots. Calmly, I pointed out the obvious. Her car had driven too close. She had ignored the size of the machine, and she was the one who caused the damage. But Karen wasn't interested in reason. She crossed her arms, tapping her foot, and kept repeating the same line. "This is your fault, and the HOA will hear about it." I almost laughed. My tractor had a solid steel frame, and all it carried was a faint streak of her car's paint. Meanwhile, her bumper looked like it had been through a war. Still, she argued, trying to twist the story to her side. She said I was blocking the road, when in fact, I was on my own property line, doing the work I had every right to do. I could feel the heat of her anger, but instead of shouting back, I did something different. I pulled out my phone. Her face shifted the second she realized I was snapping pictures. Close-ups of the dent, the scratches, and exactly where her car sat in relation to my tractor. If she wanted a fight, I wasn't giving her words. I was giving her proof, and that proof was about to change everything. "He was blocking the road, officer. I couldn't get by," she said, trying to make it sound convincing. But the officer's eyes went straight to my tractor, then to the ground, then to the line where her tires clearly crossed onto my property. He asked me to explain, and I calmly walked him through what happened, showing the pictures I had taken just minutes before. The evidence was clear. Karen tried to interrupt, but every word out of her mouth only made her look more reckless. The officer nodded slowly, taking notes, while she started to realize that this wasn't going the way she planned. And then came the moment that turned the whole situation upside down. The officer walked around her car, shining his flashlight, even though the sun was already high. He crouched near the bumper, then stood up and asked for her license and registration. Karen fumbled with her purse, pulling out papers with a shaky hand. I could see the hesitation in her eyes, the way she avoided looking directly at him. The officer studied the documents, then checked his tablet. His eyebrows lifted just slightly, and I knew something wasn't right. He asked her if she was aware that her registration had expired months ago. Karen's face turned red, and she stammered something about the HOA being responsible for mailing her notices, which didn't make any sense at all. The officer wasn't buying it. He asked if she also knew she had 2 unpaid tickets tied to her car. Her attitude shifted instantly. Gone was the confidence, replaced with excuses and nervous laughter. She tried to wave it off, saying it was just paperwork and not a big deal. But the officer didn't laugh. He told her plain and simple, if a car isn't legal to drive, it doesn't belong on the road. Karen looked like she had been slapped. She glanced at me, then back at the officer, realizing this wasn't just about a dented bumper anymore. Her car wasn't just part of a silly argument. It was about to become the reason she lost more than her pride. And I stood there, arms crossed, watching the cracks in her story split wide open. Karen's voice grew sharper, her words tumbling out in a rush as she tried to talk her way out of it. This is ridiculous. I pay HOA fees. I keep this neighborhood in order. You can't just take my car." She snapped at the officer, as if her membership gave her immunity. The officer stayed calm, but his tone was firm. He explained again that the registration was expired, the tickets were unpaid, and her car was now considered unfit for the road. Karen's bravado started to crumble. Though she still tried to put on a show, insisting she was being harassed. The officer didn't argue. Instead, he pulled out his radio and called for a tow truck. That single word, tow, hit her harder than anything I could have said. She froze, staring at her car like she couldn't believe what was about to happen. When the tow truck rolled in, its chains rattling, the reality finally sank in. Karen rushed to stand in front of her car, arms spread wide, but the officer gently moved her aside. I leaned against my tractor, silent, watching the scene unfold. The driver hooked the car quickly, lifting the front wheels off the ground. Karen's anger turned to pleading, her voice cracking as she begged them not to take it. But there was no stopping it now. The same woman who had stormed at me with so much confidence was suddenly powerless, watching her precious car get hauled away in front of everyone. The tow truck rumbled down the road with Karen's car hanging helplessly behind it, and for the first time that day, the field felt quiet again. Karen stood frozen, her arms crossed tight, her face pale as she realized she had nothing left to argue about. The officer handed me a copy of the report, reminding me to keep the photos I'd taken just in case she tried to twist the story later. I thanked him, then climbed back up onto my tractor. The hum of the engine started again, steady and strong, drowning out the last of Karen's muttering. As I steered back into the rows of corn, I glanced over my shoulder once more. She was still there on the side of the road, staring at the dust. No HOA authority to back her up, no car to lean on, and no power to bully her way through. The harvest went on, the golden stalks falling in neat lines, while her world had just been flipped upside down. Word spread quickly around the neighborhood, and it wasn't long before people knew exactly what had happened. Some even gave me a nod or a quiet smile when they passed, the kind that said they had been waiting for someone to finally stand up to her. I didn't need to say a word. The sight of her car being pulled away had spoken louder than anything. Out there in the middle of the fields, I kept working, knowing justice had handled itself. I didn't waste time. With the photo safe on my phone, I stepped back and dialed the police. Karen's expression shifted from smug to nervous, but she still tried to keep her voice loud. "Go ahead, call them. They'll take my side," she shouted, though her tone cracked at the edges. I spoke clearly to the dispatcher, explained that a car had struck my tractor during harvest, and within minutes an officer was on the way. Karen kept pacing in the gravel, muttering about how farmers think they own everything. I stayed quiet, leaning against the tractor, letting her dig herself deeper with every word. When the patrol car pulled up, the flashing lights caught her off guard. She suddenly softened her tone, switching from anger to innocence as she pointed at her dented bumper.